Right now, in Star Citizen, prices shift, inventories drain, supply tightens. But famine doesn't cascade through a system. Piracy doesn't choke an industrial world. A war in one region doesn't send shockwaves through the galaxy's economy. Duping exploits can flood the game with money and commodities, and the wider simulation barely flinches. The economy reacts, but it doesn't truly live yet. And that tells you everything about where Star Citizen's economy currently is, and everything about how hard the real problem actually is. I want to be upfront about something. I'm not approaching this as an outside analyst who read a wiki article and decided to make content. I have spent more hours in the persistent universe than I have in any other game. I have been a backer since 2016, and you may even consider me a whale. Yes, I've walked my way up the concierge hill of embarrassment. I've run the trade routes. I've watched the commodity prices sit completely still while I cleared out an entire station stock of agresium. I know what a broken economy feels like from the inside. I also work in quantitative finance and data science, specifically in modeling how complex systems behave, how agent-based simulations produce emergent outcomes, and how those outcomes tend to surprise everyone, including the people who built them. So when Cloud Imperium started talking about StarSim, about hundreds of thousands of virtual agents generating a living economy from the bottom up, I had a very specific reaction. Not "that sounds cool," but "that is an extraordinarily hard computational problem, and I want to talk about it." So, this series is about something that most Star Citizen coverage doesn't really touch. Not because it isn't interesting, but because it sits in an awkward gap between two audiences. On one side, you have the Star Citizen community, waiting on systems like Quantum that are supposed to make the economy feel truly alive. On the other, you have economists, systems theorists, and computer scientists working on agent-based modeling, computational economics, and emergent behavior, many of whom probably have no idea Star Citizen even exists. This series lives in that gap. Because what Cloud Imperium is attempting isn't just a cool game feature. It is one of the most ambitious attempts to build a large-scale simulated economy inside a persistent live environment, with millions of potential participants who can and absolutely will try to break it. And that last part matters more than most people realize. Because building a dynamic economy is difficult. Building one that survives contact with players may be one of the hardest problems in modern game design. So let's start with the problem. Every economy in a game, every MMO, every space sim, every trading game, eventually has to answer one fundamental question. Where do prices come from? Most games, including Star Citizen right now, answer that question the easy way. A designer sits down, decides that agresium ore is worth 1,400 UEC per unit, and writes that number into a table. It's static, hand-tuned, and it works fine, right up until players show up. Because players do not behave the way designers hope economies will behave. They discover the most profitable route on day one, and then everyone runs it. They optimize the fun out of the system. They flood markets, exploit bottlenecks, and converge relentlessly toward whatever produces the highest return for the lowest risk. Star Citizen already has limited price fluctuations and supply reactions, but the underlying economy still doesn't meaningfully respond to famine, piracy, industrial collapse, or systemic disruption. This is the static economy problem, and it's not unique to Star Citizen. It's a fundamental design challenge stretching back to the earliest online worlds. But what makes Star Citizen different, genuinely different, not just in a marketing sense, is how Cloud Imperium is attempting to solve it. Not by writing bigger tables, not by manually scripting economic events, but by building a simulation. A simulation of vast numbers of virtual entities making individual decisions, whose collective behavior is supposed to generate a functioning economy from the bottom up, across entire star systems. That's not just a game design problem. It's computational economics, distributed systems design, adversarial behavior, and emergent complexity, all at the same time. That's not just a game design problem. That's a research problem. Cloud Imperium's solution to this research problem is a system called StarSim, formerly known as Quantum, and at its core, it runs what computer scientists call a multi-agent simulation. Here's the basic idea. Instead of one economist at a spreadsheet deciding what grain is worth, you have hundreds of thousands of lightweight virtual agents. CIG calls them quanta, each independently deciding whether to buy grain, sell grain, haul grain, or grow grain. Each quanta has its own attributes, skills, desires, an inventory, a job. They don't have bodies, no pathfinding, no animations, no geometry. They are pure economic decision makers, running in the background of the simulation at a scale that actual physical NPCs could never achieve. And here's what makes it interesting. Their collective behavior determines the prices, the supply, the trade routes, everything. No designer writes a number. The number emerges from millions of individual decisions. When players interact with the world, buying commodities, completing missions, disrupting trade lanes, those actions feed back into StarSim. The simulation sees them as inputs. It adjusts. The world responds. That feedback loop, player action influencing simulation state changing what the world offers players, is the thing CIG has been trying to build for years. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the hardest problems in applied computer science. Let's be honest about something. Agent-based economic modeling is not a new idea. Academic economists and complexity scientists have been building these simulations for decades. The Santa Fe Institute, the work of Thomas Schelling on segregation models, the Sugarscape model from the 1990s, one of the earliest experiments in simulating an economy from individual agent behavior. Today, you can earn a master's degree and PhD from universities such as Iowa State University and the University of Essex, researching topics like the market microstructures of stock markets and markets for electricity trading. Central banks, including the Banca d'Italia, Banco de Mexico, Bank of Canada, and Bank of England, are actively integrating agent-based computational economics models into their policy toolkits, which have direct impacts on our daily lives in the real world. These models are fascinating. They're also usually running a few thousand agents on a controlled research cluster with the explicit goal of forecasting future prices or testing a single hypothesis. What CIG is proposing is categorically different. Hundreds of thousands of quanta, multiple star systems, an economy covering mining, refining, manufacturing, hauling, defense, illegal trade, insurance policies, inheritance and other taxes, and player-owned infrastructure, all simultaneously. And layered on top of that, potentially millions of human players whose behavior is not just unpredictable, but adversarial. Players will find the exploit. Players will corner the market. Players will form organizations that function as economic monopolies. Players will grief trade routes for fun. Every one of those behaviors is what economists call an exogenous shock, an input the model didn't anticipate coming from outside the system. Keeping a simulation stable under that kind of pressure is not a game design problem. It is a control theory problem. It's the same class of problem that central banks face when they try to set monetary policy in a world where every economic actor is simultaneously reacting to the policy itself. And I say that not to be dramatic. I say it because understanding why this is hard is the only way to fairly evaluate whether StarSim, if and when it ships fully, has actually solved anything. So here's where we are. Star Citizen has a mostly static economy that doesn't work the way a real economy does. Cloud Imperium has proposed a solution, StarSim, that is genuinely one of the most ambitious computational economics experiments in gaming history. In much the same way, server meshing is a groundbreaking technology CIG have developed for Star Citizen and are deploying in stages. StarSim is supposed to ship as a core feature of Star Citizen 1.0. Whether it works, whether it ships, whether it survives contact with actual players, none of that is settled. But the ideas behind it are worth understanding regardless of the outcome. Because agent-based modeling, emergent pricing, monetary sinks, exogenous shocks, these aren't just game design concepts. They're real tools that economists and policy designers use to try to understand systems too complex to model any other way. In the next episode, we're going to go deep on agent-based modeling itself, what it is, where it came from, and why it produces behavior that surprises even the people who built the simulation. If you found this useful, subscribe. This is going to be a long series, and it only gets more interesting from here.